I'm sorry.
Do not be sorry. Be better. Find it.
Hey there everyone, I'm Captain Beefy with the Game Vault, and this is my long-awaited review for God of War Ragnarok. Now, there will be no major story spoilers in the review, but there will be some minor ones that cannot be helped. I did try my best to keep them to a minimum. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and a like and a sub to the channel would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get right into it.
You seem like a calm and reasonable person. Are you? A calm and reasonable person.
If the moment calls for calm.
I'd say the moment calls for calm. Yeah.
Early on in its predecessor, God of War 2018, there's a scene where Kratos takes his son on a hunt. This is very early in the game. Atreus, eager to take the shot, misses his mark, drawing the ire of his father. When Atreus apologizes, Kratos tells him not to be sorry, but to be better. God of War Ragnarok takes those two words and runs with them in this sequel. Not only is that moment called back to several times in this game, the words themselves are reflected in the game itself as God of War Ragnarok tries to be better in every aspect of the game. Now, let's break this down. Now, although the game starts where the last one both began and ended, in Midgard, there's very little redundancy in the world in which God of War Ragnarok takes place. The familiarity of the little wooden cabin is comforting, but the world around it has changed drastically. Fimbulwinter has come, covering everything with ice and snow, creating a bleak environment that is devoid of all color and diversity. This is not a criticism. I've played many games that feature this type of biome, and the way it is rendered in God of War Ragnarok is perfect. You've got bare trees, snow-covered boulders, and the crunch of Kratos and Atreus' footsteps work together to create an atmosphere that chilled me to the bone and inspired my wanderlust to get things moving forward so I could explore the other 8 realms. And let me tell you, I wasn't disappointed. We returned to Midgard later in the game, exploring the Lake of the Nine once again, but this time we do it on a sled instead of in a canoe. And much of what we remembered has either been destroyed or altered by the long, unforgiving winter. We leave Midgard and arrive in Svartalfheim, a beautiful and interesting place, a realm of dwarves, with its meandering rivers and a lake, bogs and rocky islands. It was a welcome change when I got there. The canoe rides with Atreus while Mimir told stories from the past brought me back to the previous game when the three of us explored the Lake of the Nine in Midgard. The dwarven town of Nidavellir had personality, despite the fact that its residents were mostly hidden behind closed doors, afraid of what might happen if Odin caught them talking with us. But it was still fun to explore. Then there's the Apple Core Mine, huge and full of breathtaking architecture, but linear enough to prevent getting hopelessly lost. Then there's Vanaheim. The first visit to Vanaheim is an experience unto itself. We get the meandering rivers like we had in Svartalfheim, but this time they run through a lush jungle full of colorful and admittedly sometimes dangerous plant life and a variety of animals that all run off when you approach too closely. There are tons of ruins that have been partially taken back by nature, abandoned villages that make you feel like an unwelcome guest that's trespassing. Overall, it's a stunning place. Next up was Alfheim, and let me tell you, it looked vastly different than when we last visited. Much of our time there is spent wandering this desert with this horrible sandstorm going on, exploring ruins and caves. But our brief time revisiting the light of Alfheim was rewarding as we stumbled onto an area previously visited, and when I saw the Nornir chest that was there in the previous game, Atreus actually called me out on it, which was freaking hilarious. We also get to visit Jotunheim. Now, this is the land of giants that we visited at the very end of the previous game. We meet an incredible new ally there. We do a little bit more exploring than we did in the last game in that area, and we see Jotunheim through a different lens. It's beautiful and unique with this, it's just gorgeous. absolutely gorgeous. And once again, we negotiate through some rivers and creeks, but unlike other realms, we're not using a canoe this time. Instead, we end up riding this incredible new creature. I won't spoil it for you. Now, we also end up in Helheim again, and it's relatively small in scope related to the aforementioned realms, but it's just as barren and unwelcoming as it was in the previous game. And both Niflheim and Musplheim return, once again offering the opportunity to farm experience, resources, and hack silver, as well as a way to test out different combinations of weapons, armor, and skills against a variety of enemies without the consequences of dying, depending on which realm you visit. And finally, there's Asgard, which in my opinion was actually the most underwhelming realm to visit. Now, this is only because most of the time spent there is spent indoors in Odin's sprawling home. There are a few opportunities to explore outside of the building, but it's mostly linear, and I didn't get to see as much of the Aesir's home realm as I would have liked to. Now, regardless of what realm I visited, I was often taken aback by the view. I found myself stopping to just look around and wonder at the beautiful landscape and the amazing vistas. Little lizards, birds, squirrels, and crabs, as well as tons of other creatures, inhabit almost every realm, and they breathe life into the game and add personality to each place you visit. Now, these aren't enemies that you kill and loot, but you can take a shot at them, which, to my regret, I did, and kill them if you feel so inclined. Every character I met in my travels was unique in their design, both in their choice of clothing or armor, the weapon they chose to wield, and the detailed designs of their faces, which they actually moved properly when speaking to me. Everything blended together seamlessly from distant mountains to nearby structures, and other than the very rare pop-in, traversing the various realms was smooth and without any sort of graphical issues. Now, I did play on performance mode, but I didn't notice any degradation of the visuals, and the various sets of armor are heavily detailed. You got belts, buckles, rivets, and each one has a unique and recognizable aesthetic, other than, there's a couple reskins in there, but those I believe were the pre-order bonus sets that I got. Facial expressions were rendered with impressive realism, especially during the many cutscenes that highlighted emotional outbursts. Some done so well, they almost brought a single manly tear to my eye. Now, we'll talk more about performances in a bit, but even the hair looked great. And this is usually an issue in games when it's either too static or it moves around so much it looks like some kind of creature living on the character's head. I mean, not Kratos, of course, but other people. Now, Bear McCreary returns with another brilliant soundtrack that is just as much a part of the game as anything else. It's never distracting, it's never repetitive, and at no point does it do anything other than elevate each cutscene, battle, or canoe ride as it plays in the background. There are several themes that will play at crucial moments or when certain characters appear. The most recognizable and my personal favorite is Faye's theme. Now, the story is presented in a solid, cohesive, and compelling fashion. It began during the end of its predecessor, and it involves both Kratos and Atreus trying to prevent a fate that they wish to avoid, while they are seemingly helplessly forced to follow a preordained path that will lead them to that unwanted, unavoidable end. Ragnarok. Kratos is tired of war. He only wants to be left alone now so he can raise his son to be self-sufficient in a world that seems to push him towards war at every turn. There are subplots involving other major characters, and each of these stories revolves around the theme of family and how complicated those relationships can be. Sindri and Brock return, and now that they're reunited, their bond has done nothing but strengthened, even though Sindri has kept a secret from Brock that haunts him. Freya's back, and after the loss of Baldur in the last game, she is bent on revenge against Kratos and Atreus, a heartbreaking antagonist that Kratos has no desire to do battle with. Odin and Thor present a different type of father and son relationship, toxic and full of pain, and Thor himself has a wife and daughter, both of whom he loves, so he wants to keep his daughter from meeting the same fate that her brothers did in the previous game. Thrud The daughter of Thor is at odds with her mother Sif over the life she wishes to lead, and Thor and Sif both want what is best for her, but they don't exactly align on their views. Now, sons betray their fathers, fathers break their sons, and siblings are often at odds. Just like real familial relationships, the ones depicted in God of War Ragnarok are complicated and so often heartbreaking. All the major characters have arcs that show them grow and change, not always in a positive manner, however, and the voice acting is stellar. There's not a single character's performance that wasn't sold by the actor. Now, my only issue, and it is minor, is that the actors don't perform with accents that reflect the source material. Despite that very minor gripe, the performances are done so well that it really doesn't even matter. Thor is a force of nature, much like Kratos. Odin comes off as a benevolent grandfather. Atreus as a teenager, he's finding his way into manhood, and Freya, well, Freya is Freya. Fierce and furious, her performance stands out as the best of the lot. And considering the talent around her, that is really saying something. There's a scene in Vanaheim between her and Kratos that breaks my heart every time I watch it. Brock is still foul-mouthed and endearing, Sindri's still fussy and neurotic. Tyr, a new character, is soft-spoken and very zen, and the rest of the cast, from the smallest of support characters on up, do each and every scene justice. One of God of War Ragnarok's greatest strengths is in the acting.
You know who I am? Back before winter set in, there were some misunderstandings. Regrettable ones. But I think we all have a better idea of who we're dealing with. Now, what you did to his boys. Self-defense.
Alright, so I've gone on enough about the art of the game. Let's get to the craft. God of War Ragnarok is being better in this aspect as well. Now, one major criticism the last game had was a lack of diversity in the variety of enemies, like with trolls in particular appearing as a reskinned boss several times in the game. Trolls are here too, but they're an optional mini-boss this time around, and their inclusion is hardly noticed due to the sheer variety of enemies you face. Draugr are back, as are dragons and elves, but I also came across a variety of Aesir, the Einherjar, who use Bifrost in their attacks, raiders who throw themselves into combat in a variety of ways, Wyverns, Gradingers, Hellraisers, Berserkers, Hellraiders, and more will present a variety of challenges, and oh yeah, you know it, there's a few Valkyrie as well. Just in case you forgot how horrible they were to fight, now there are tons more creatures with varied attack patterns and attributes to engage with using your axe, blades, and a third as of yet unmentioned weapon. Now, upgrading weapons and armor is very similar to the last game, and there seems to be no shortage of resources, especially once Musplheim is unlocked and you can participate in the trials there. So feel free early game to try out different sets and mix and match to suit your style of play. Don't worry about upgrading. You're going to have plenty of stuff to fix it all up. Now, maxing out sets to level 9 is not the easiest feat, as the resources required are locked behind story progression. So you're not going to be able to go out and get to god level armor until late game, which is great because it keeps things challenging. Now, using enchantments is easier this time around. Instead of slotting them into various armor pieces and whatnot, and then you have to move them around when you switch sets, you acquire an amulet a few hours into the game that you can upgrade to hold up to 9 different enchantments, and they offer you a wide variety of options with these that will suit pretty much any play style. So keep your eye out for that amulet. Now, regular skills are acquired using XP, and each weapon, including that of Atreus, his bow, has its own dedicated tree, as the skills progress naturally by using them. So like when something's been used a certain amount of times, you get the option to add a bonus to that skill. It might be damage protection, or something else, but each one you unlock will give you 3 options that can be changed with no further cost once you pay to unlock it the first time. Kratos now has 3 options with his rage that can be leveled. Atreus has sigils that can be leveled, and the list goes on. So every now and then stop, Take stock of your character, his weapons, his armor, his skills, and look at all that, because you might be able to make some serious upgrades on the fly when you come up against a serious tough boss or a challenging arena you gotta fight through. Light and heavy attacks make a return. They can be upgraded as well, much like in the last game, so make sure you explore every nook and cranny and open up every chest to locate them all. Some of them are back from the last game, others are brand new, and cycling through your weapons to fire off various runic attacks it's just a great way to deal out massive amounts of damage. Now, each realm is crafted in a fairly linear fashion, but most of them have optional areas that can be missed. So if you're pushing through just doing the main story, you may want to slow down a little bit. Now, this isn't an open world game by any means, but you will have the option to revisit most areas once you progress the story enough. Realms are designed to give you freedom, but they're never convoluted to the point of getting lost or stuck for a protracted amount of time, which is nice because, we all know that can be frustrating. Now, there's a lot of puzzles in the game, and I found them to be a welcome change after fighting off enemies for some time. Switching from using my muscle memory to using my brain to figure out how to open up a Nornir chest or how to access an area that was out of reach kept things interesting and mixed it up perfectly. None of the puzzles were over the top in their difficulty, and they were mostly confined to a reasonable area within the game map. Now, there are a number of optional settings in the game that you can use to customize your experience, including a variety of accessibility options that will assist players who might not normally be able to enjoy this game. This is fantastic, as it opens up the experience to almost everyone. Take some time to explore them. They're not difficulty options, but there are several quality of life options that you can utilize to make the game as enjoyable as you want it to be. It's your game. Play it the way you want to. Now, once the main game is over, don't leave right away and move on to the next thing. There's still a lot of optional areas to explore, tons of bosses to seek out and fight, 48 ravens to kill, which will unlock a set of armor and some runic attacks, not to mention a secret boss battle, the trials in Musplheim the Master, and so much more. At the time of this review, I'm less than a handful of trophies away from getting a platinum, and I'm not going to rest until I have it now. My overall score for this game, 9.5 out of 10. The game was a sheer joy to play through, and it rightfully was up for a multitude of awards, including Game of the Year, which it didn't win. Elden Ring won that, but that's understandable. But why not a 10, you say? Well, there's always room for improvement, even in a game as great as this. So thank you all so much for your time. Please leave your thoughts on God of War Ragnarok down in the comments below. Did it meet or exceed, or did it fall short of your expectations? Leave a spoiler warning if you want to discuss the ending or key moments in the game so we don't ruin the story for others. A like is a huge help, and a sub to the channel, well, that would be amazing. As always, I'm Captain Beefy with the Game Vault. I will see you next time. Until then, peace.